The Mafia boss wasn't afraid of the sniper, but he couldn't stop thinking about the woman who kissed him. Hector Ritchie was the kind of man entire cities feared. Enemies wanted him dead, allies obeyed him, and no one dared get close without permission. Then a strange bartender walked straight to his table, whispered, "Trust me," and kissed him in front of everyone. Seconds later, he realized she had saved his life. But the real danger wasn't the sniper across the street. It was the fact that Hector suddenly wanted to keep her close.
Eels. Today, you and I are going to examine the architecture of a mafia tragedy. 5 years ago, Jody Russo buried her father, hoping to pour drinks, and became a ghost. Then she spots Hector Ritchie, the East Coast reigning mob boss, dining across the street. A sniper's glint targets his head. Her dormant assassin instincts reignite. 3 seconds remain. She sprints across the freezing pavement, approaches the dawn, and seals his fate with a kiss. Eels. We must ask ourselves, can human connection survive the inherent toxicity of a cartel romance? Consider the kiss of death. Jody cleans glasses when a sniper's glare catches the window. 5 years of repressed survival conditioning violently resurrect. Eels. The rifle barrel locks onto the restaurant across the avenue, seeking Hector Ritchie. Jody drops her glass. The shatter is purely symbolic. Her brain executes the grim combat arithmetic her father drilled into her. 10 seconds until the syndicate boss falls. Panic only accelerates the trigger. She chooses a desperate gamble, a reckless maneuver that permanently transfers the crosshairs onto her own spine. The cycle of violence turns again. Eels. Hector Ritchie is the apex predator of the East Coast. Without him, the streets drown in a brutal syndicate war. Perhaps Jody's repressed killer instinct merely needed permission to breathe. Hauntingly calm, she tells her coworker to watch the bar before stepping into the fire. Pushing into the February chill, her shoes strike the frozen pavement. Every frantic step toward the kingpin echoes a heart drawn back into darkness. Eels. She breaches a dim room thick with old money and quiet sins. Bypassing the host like a phantom, her eyes lock onto Hector. Dressed in a suit worth her annual rent, he sits flanked by hardened enforcers. They are fiercely debating the economics of bleeding territory. Eels. The enforcers curse rival boss Lindsay Marone for bleeding their southern borders. Hector silences them instantly. Lindsay is tomorrow's issue. Then he pauses, noticing Jody's sudden arrival. The hitmen tense to draw weapons on this intruder. Yet Hector remains statuesque. His pitch-black eyes trace her silhouette in a slow, calculated sweep. Finally, a dangerously quiet inquiry slips from his lips. "Can I help you?" Eels. 2 seconds until execution. Jody slams her hands on the wood, invading the dawn space to whisper 2 words. "Trust me." Then she kisses him. She weaponizes her own flesh to obstruct the sniper's scope. Hector goes rigid. Yet, in a profound display of subtext, he does not push her away. No violence. She tastes expensive whiskey and absolute ruin, counting down the longest 3 seconds imaginable. Eels. Across the street, the assassin Jane Volov simmers. A stranger's, finger tight on the trigger, but her boss Lindsay demanded a clean kill. As 2 agonizing seconds bleed out, Jody holds firm. Defeated, Jane dismantles the rifle and vanishes. Pulling back, Jody gasps for air. Hector studies her with dark fascination while his soldiers blindly reach for their iron. Eels. Hector raises a hand and his loyal attack dogs freeze. Trembling with adrenaline, Jody stammers an apology. Catching her breath, she nods toward, confessing a sniper on the opposite roof nearly ended him. She became a human shield, exploiting a professional assassin's aversion to collateral damage.
Hector analyzes the window, intellectually assembling the grim truth.
When his dark eyes return to hers, they project a terrifying existential chill down her spine. Eels. Let us observe how the power dynamic shifts here. The inevitable question hangs heavily. How did you know? Swallowing her fear, Jody offers one loaded word: training. You can practically see his mind deconstructing that admission. She urges him to vanish before secondary hitmen arrive. Holding her gaze, Hector commands his muscle with quiet authority. "Logan, we leave now." The scarred giant stands like a looming monument to violence. Eels. Hector rises, smoothing his coat as though mortality had not just grazed him. Firm, yet unexpected her wrist. "You are coming with me." It is an absolute edict. The physical contact transmits a strange electric sorrow. She knows she must flee to her ordinary life, but his heavy gaze paralyzes her. She tries to resist, yet his expression betrays a tragic blend of toxic dominance and desperate need. Feels. He demands to know why she spared him. Internally, Jody confronts the bitter truth. The crime family will realize she ruined the contract, making her a target anyway. Defeated, she surrenders to the inevitable nightmare. They step into the alley toward an armored vehicle, a quiet steel beast engineered specifically for his violent reality. Feels. Logan drives while the crime lord holds the door, a jarring courtesy from a man built on brutality. She sinks into the cold leather. The heavy door clicks, metaphorically signing her soul back to the shadows. As they pull away, Logan watches her with paranoid eyes, asking who she is. Hector merely studies her, his voice a smooth blade. Good question. We will unpack this mystery tomorrow night. Feels. Trapped within the dim cabin, Hector demands her true name. Jody Russo, she exhales. A relic buried 5 years prior. She attempts to hide behind her civilian bartender persona, but the dawn is far too perceptive. Ordinary citizens do not identify a sniper in 3 seconds. Leaning closer, his dark menace blending into the shadows, Hector orders her to drop the facade and hand over the broken truth. Feels. Jody realizes the tide is turning. She must drown in her own history. She admits she was born into the Mafia life. Her father was Anthony Russo. A suffocating silence engulfs the car. Logan violently swerves the armored vehicle, breathing the legendary name with deep reverence, the architect of the 2018 Harbor bloodbath. Jody nods into the darkness. While Logan completely loses his composure, Hector quietly processes the immense psychological weight of his savior. Feels. A tragic pride swells within her. Her father systematically forged her into a living weapon, teaching brutal combat and the quiet art of observation. Hector's gaze fundamentally shifts. She is no longer a dangerous anomaly. The cabin fills with an agonizing tension far more complex than simple romance. You are Anthony Russo's blood, he states in a low baritone. Jody nods. We watch this heavy realization drag Hector deeper into a psychological abyss. Feels. Hector asks where the legend hides. Jody delivers the bitter reality. Dead. Murdered 5 years prior in a senseless turf war. She was 23 when his blood stained her hands. That trauma ended her underworld existence. Feels. She sought peace. Until today, when her ancestral ghosts awakened to protect a stranger. Noticeably shaken, Hector asks why she would risk herself for a cartel leader. A rare vulnerability shatters his stoicism. Jody turns. Feels, acutely aware of the suffocating intimacy trapped between them. Feels. The overwhelming intimacy of this moment is undeniable. Jody delivers the grim truth. Her father taught her a breathing king prevents chaos. She bluntly states Hector is too structurally important to fall. Feels. His death guarantees a ruthless syndicate war. Completely captivated by her cold, analytical logic, Hector calls her incredible. His voice carries a dark reverence. Feels. They sit shoulder to shoulder in the velvet dark, two apex predators finally recognizing the profound, tragic scars etched into one another. Feels. So what do you and I make of this collision between two damaged souls? Jody desperately tries to close the door. She claims retirement, insisting she merely pours drinks now. But Hector pierces right through the metaphor. Liar, Feels. He states unflinchingly. Invading her personal space, he confronts her with an inescapable reality. You never truly stop being a weapon. The violence is inscribed in her DNA. She despises his accuracy. Beneath her civilian mask, that dark, Feels, intoxicating adrenaline is fully awake once more. Feels. Dodging his psychological trap, she asks where they are going. Hector studies her like a fractured mosaic, questioning why she cares. Jody drops the logical consequence. Those hitmen will realize she ruined their contract. Feels, and they will demand her blood. Hector confirms this with glacial certainty. Exactly. Reaching out, the Dawn tilts her chin, forcing eye contact. It is a terrifying yet strangely gentle display of absolute power. Feels. Jody is suffocating under the colossal weight of the underworld war she just invited. Feels. Let's explore this together. Hector issues his verdict. She stays under his watch until every hitman falls. Jody plays survivor, insisting she needs no hero. But dodging Mafia bullets is a fatal game. Hector flashes a ruthless, tragic smile. Feels. She saved the boss, so he saves her. A sworn blood oath. He holds her face, the space between them dangerously thin. Here's the real tragedy, though. He wants her caged in his empire. Feels. Eager to strip away that bartender disguise and uncover the broken weapon underneath. Feels. Her heart pounds as she finally cracks, whispering she will only stay until the syndicate threat passes. Hector drops his hand, an arrogant shadow crossing. She is never leaving his world. The tragedy is set in stone. Jody stares out the window as the city lights dissolve into wealthy, isolated darkness. Their driver takes them deep into the silent, fortress-like suburbs of the crime elite. She is walking straight into the jaws of the beast. Feels. Jody suffocates in regret. A fake kiss to save a mafia boss? Absolute madness. She cannot outrun her violent ghosts anymore. They arrive at the estate, a monument built on dark money and old sins, heavy stone, iron gates, and long shadows. As they pull into a garage filled with untouchable luxury cars, a freezing truth settles deep in her bones. The criminal underworld never truly let her go. She is stepping right back into the fire. Feels. The boss opens her door, holding out a scarred hand. She hesitates, but takes it. She is no frightened child. She was raised by a master tactician. Hector leads her through haunted halls lined with stolen art. Without missing a beat, he announces his crew is raiding her apartment for clothes. He demands her keys, moving with the freezing efficiency of a man who owns the night. Jody stubbornly fights back, insisting she can survive without his charity. Feels. The power dynamic shifts violently here. Hector freezes, his stare crushing her defiance. He tells her she could leave, but she will not. The syndicate leader takes total control. He coldly lays out the facts. Feels. Those assassins are likely sitting in her dark apartment right now, waiting. He refuses to let her die over cheap pride. Hector steps into her personal space, his voice dropping to a heavy whisper. Give me the address, please. Feels. Hearing a ruthless monster beg shatters her completely. She drops the keys into his palm. Feels. Apartment 4B, she whispers. Their fingers brush, sparking an undeniable, tragic chemistry. Hector barks cold orders into his phone before turning his heavy gaze back to her. He guides her to a sprawling, lonely guest room featuring a massive marble bath. He moves like a king locking away a prisoner. But then he pauses at the doorway. He just stands there in the quiet, studying her. Feels. The tension in that doorway is thick enough to drown in. Hector breaks the quiet. My room is at the end of the hall, he murmurs, sending a shiver down her spine. Thank you for saving me today. You are exceptional. Then he vanishes into the shadows. Alone, Feels. Jody sinks into the heated tub, trying to wash away the evening's chaos. A faceless guard drops off her bags. She slips into soft sleepwear and collapses into a massive bed. But sleep refuses to come. Feels. Her mind remains trapped on his mouth and those penetrating eyes. Feels. By 2 a.m, the mansion's silence is deafening. Craving cold water, she slips out barefoot, moving like the ghost her father trained her to be. But here is her fatal mistake. Feels. She is wearing a threadbare cotton sleep set, tiny shorts, and a paper-thin tank top. No armor, nothing hidden. She assumes she is safe wandering a sleeping fortress. She drifts into a sprawling kitchen of cold marble and steel. Feels. Bathed in harsh automated light. Jody pulls open the heavy refrigerator door, hair falling over bare shoulders, completely unaware. Feels. Freezing air washes over her skin, raising a rush of goosebumps. In that thin fabric, she is painfully exposed. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the dark. Cannot sleep? The deep, gravelly sound makes her chest ache. Jody spins around, breath catching in her doorway. He wears nothing but loose gray sweatpants, riding dangerously low on his hips, bare-chested, a walking canvas of brutal muscle and faded violence. Feels. Hector takes an agonizing amount of time dragging his eyes over her, slow, starving. Jody's face burns under his heavy gaze. When he finally meets her eyes, a dark, consuming fire burns in his stare. Sorry, she breathes. Feels. Crossing her arms to hide her fragile frame. She stammers about needing water, but words die in her mouth. The mobster begins a predatory walk across the marble floor. It is okay. The house is yours too, he whispers. His voice is dangerously rough. Feels. Fighting a desperate war to keep his eyes locked on hers. Feels. He stops inches away. In a rare break of iron control, he runs a heavy hand through his dark hair. His eyes drop to her chest for a second before violently snapping back up. That is small, he mutters. Jody bites her trembling lip, flushed with heat. She feels entirely exposed, drowning in his shadow. She tries to laugh it off, whispering she always sleeps like this, never expecting company. Her voice shakes terribly. The dangerous boss looks entirely ready to consume her soul. Feels. Here is the quiet tragedy. Jody actually craves this heat. Hector steps in so close. She feels the warmth radiating from his bare chest. Well, now you have us in a lethal velvet tone. He sweeps his eyes over her, completely dropping the polite act. He confesses he is trying to be a gentleman, but her outfit makes it impossible. Jody lets out a breathless sigh. Hector tracks it like a starving hunter. You and I know she needs to run right now, before this shadow swallows them entirely. Feels. Fear paralyzes her. Her feet are frozen to the tile, to see if his cat's ruins her like before. Hector, she breathes. The raspy whisper hangs in the air. Protest or invitation? Even Jody is unsure. The boss closes in. His fingers graze her chin with a heartbreaking gentleness that contradicts his lethal stare. He tilts her face up, pulling her close. You saved me today, he rumbles, his deep voice shaking the quiet room as he brings up that desperate public kiss. Feels. And now you are in my house, wearing things that barely cover you. His fingers trace her neck. The touch is incredibly light, but burns straight to her core. He flatly asks if she is testing him. He warns her a man like him has limits, Feels, and she is on the absolute edge. No, it was an accident, Jody whispers. But the lie is paper thin. Her body betrays her. She tries mentioning water, but words turn to ash. Why? Because Hector brushes his thumb against her racing pulse. Feels. That single touch sends violent shivers through her bones. Feels. Dangerous accidents, Hector mutters. Then, with agonizing restraint, he steps back. The sudden chill hits Jody like a blow. She fights the desperate urge to step right back into his orbit. Hector orders her to lock herself in her room immediately. Feels. She must leave before he forgets she is a guest and does something they will regret forever. Her heart hammers in her chest. Okay, good night, Hector, she stammers, barely recognizing her shaking voice. She turns to flee, but freezes when his dark, Feels amused whisper catches her. Feels. Good night, Jody, and please wear something more tomorrow. The weight of his demand is deafening. Her face burns with thrill as she flees, gripping her water bottle like a shield. Sprinting upstairs, she hears a heavy, defeated groan echo from the dark. Feels. The untouchable crime boss whispers to himself, she is going to kill me. Inside her room, Jody slams the door, gasping for air. She swore off the criminal life and dangerous men years ago. Yet here she is, trembling in a mafia fortress. Feels, starving for a doomed romance. Feels. The bed is incredibly soft, but sleep is impossible. Not after that electric standoff downstairs. Hector looked at her like a man dying of thirst, wanting to ruin her and protect her in the exact same breath. Jody hides under her blankets, Feels, shivering despite the warm room. She fights the brutal ache to march right down the hall, push his door open, and let the fire consume them both. Suddenly, her phone screen lights up the dark. Jamie is texting her in a panic, demanding answers. Feels. Jody debates telling her best friend everything. But how do you explain a ghost story? I am fine. I will explain tomorrow, she types, powering the device off. Feels. The midnight silence in this mansion is suffocating. The walls hold violent secrets she will never understand. She shuts her eyes, but she only sees him. Shirtless, bleeding danger. Feels. Yet touching her with a heartbreaking softness a killer should not possess. Eventually, pure exhaustion drags her under. She falls into a fever dream of his lips on hers. So what do you and I make of this? She is no longer kissing him to save his life. Feels. She kisses him because she is starving for it. Stick with me. This tragedy is mutating into an absolute obsession. Feels. Morning sunlight pulls Jody back to reality, exposing her vulnerability in this wolf pack. But here is the psychological tragedy. Hector is not dangerous because he runs a crime family. He is a threat because he makes her want to burn her own life down. She ignores the sirens. Slipping out of bed, she dreads the mirror. When she finally looks, her eyes are glowing, her face flushed. And you and I know the heat has absolutely nothing to do with it. Feels. She whispers to the glass that she is in deep trouble. The broken woman staring back simply smiles in surrender. Jody is drowning, and the terrifying part is she loves the feeling. As the day begins, this psychological gravity pulls her entirely under. Reality hits her chest like an anvil. The desperate kiss, the getaway car, the massive estate. And the quiet tension of that 2 a.m. kitchen confrontation. Just replaying the memory makes her blood run dangerously hot. Feels. She steps under the shower, scrubbing the night before hiding inside heavy jeans and long sleeves. She simply cannot survive another look from him. Downstairs, dark coffee leads her straight to Logan. One glance at his dead eyes confirms the blood is already spilling. She forces out a quiet hello. Logan represents a completely different kind of monster. He lacks Hector's chilling discipline. Logan is an open wound, wearing his violence like a bloody badge of honor. Feels. Logan points a scarred hand toward the coffee. She clings to her mug, begging for an anchor after 24 hours of sheer madness. Then Hector enters. He wears a flawless dark suit, armor masking the predator underneath. Their eyes meet, The silence stretching between them is heavy enough to snap a spine. Hector breaks the connection first. Turning his back, he slips right into his cold Mafia persona. Jody shrinks back, wishing she could vanish into the morning shadows entirely. Feels. Hector demands the night's report, his voice like freezing wind. Logan delivers the grim facts. The shooter was Jane Vulov, ordered by Lindsay Morone. That name drops like a cinder block into the quiet room. You can practically watch the violence rolling off Hector's shoulders. When Jody dares to look, the man she kissed is entirely gone. Only the brutal king is left. Hector whispers the name to himself. That quiet, breathless promise is far more terrifying than a scream. Feels. Hector takes a slow sip, his jaw tight enough to snap bone, demanding a location. Logan promises they will drag the rat into the light, tearing the streets apart for answers. But then Logan pauses, dropping a bitter reality. The assassin is a total ghost. She completely vanished. Logan turns his heavy stare directly toward Jody, and the room drops 10 degrees. The psychological horror of what comes next already hangs in the air. Feels. Logan exposes the cycle of violence. If Lindsay paid for blood once, he will pay again. But now the crosshairs rest on Jody. Hector's expression turns pride.
He only fears the bullet aimed at her heart.
Nobody touches her, he snarls, speaking with the conviction of a man commanding fate itself. Logan watches his boss for a heavy minute. Then he asks the agonizing question we have been waiting to hear. Feels. Logan asks the question suffocating the room. Is the boss catching feelings?
The kitchen's silence turns thick.
Jody stares into her coffee, gripping the mug line, terrified of Hector's eyes. Finally, Hector offers a careful maybe. He confesses she is different, smart, brave. His voice drops low, calling her beautiful.
Jody's heart
Simply stops. She looks up, only to find his dark eyes already locked onto hers, burning with an intensity that threatens to swallow her whole. Feels. Logan clears his throat, realizing he stepped into a private emotional storm. He brings up her bloodline. She is Anthony Russo's daughter, a name spoken with genuine reverence. Hector honors the crime legend with a nod, but his eyes stay glued to Jody. Then, Hector turns and delivers a chilling command. Protect her like she belongs to him. That terrifying concept of ownership hangs heavy in the cold air, leaving Jody paralyzed in beautiful confusion. Feels. Let us pause and unpack this psychology together. Logan does not blink. He simply asks if she is already his. Hector answers with chilling certainty, speaking the words like a dark prophecy. Not yet, he murmurs. Then he looks at Jody, his gaze carrying a violent promise, adding that she will be. Logan nods, slipping out to handle the syndicate business. Suddenly, they are completely alone. The silence returns, bleeding with a tension so thick it feels absolutely suffocating. Feels. Hector moves closer, erasing their safe distance. He asks about lunch, though his eyes demand absolute surrender. Jody masks her racing pulse with a joke about house arrest, admitting her day is empty. Hector states they will eat together. It is not quite an order, but leaves zero room for debate. This is the quiet gravity of a ruler, and both know she has no desire to flee. Feels. He mentions a hidden terrace out back for them to talk. The morning fades like a dream. Jody hides in his vast library, her mind spiraling. Hector claimed her, carving her future in stone. By noon, she wears a simple dress, realizing resisting him is like dancing on a razor blade. She steps onto the breathtaking terrace. A perfect table overlooks the garden, standing as a fragile sanctuary away from his brutal, violent world. Feels. Hector waits. Stripping his suit armor for a white shirt makes him look infinitely more dangerous. He pulls out her chair, his touch sending a shock to her core. Silent staff serve food and vanish. They eat in heavy quiet. Jody searches for courage to confront this tension, but Hector strikes first. Setting down his silver, he locks his haunting eyes onto hers, pulling her completely into his dark orbit. Feels. The hardened mob boss vanishes. Hector softens, asking Jody about her father, offering a rare glimpse behind his ironed mask. Jody describes a tragic paradox, a street killer, yet a gentle guardian. He unbought her ice cream. Underward devours the weak. Then she reveals her deepest trauma. Her father bled to death in her arms over meaningless territory. His final desperate breath was a plea, begging her to escape the shadows forever. Feels. Hector listens, absorbing her trauma. Sorrow reflects in his eyes, recognizing the crushing weight of a father's legacy. He murmurs her dad sounded like a good man. Then, Hector reveals his own origin of grief. Left drowning in debt after his father died, he was surrounded by wolves. He built his syndicate from ashes, making cold choices, losing his humanity. Instantly, Jody realizes a terrifying truth. They are two broken mirrors, reflecting the exact same pain. Heals. The air becomes a sanctuary of unspoken understanding. Then, Hector asks the question she fears most. Do you want to return to this life? Stripped of his armor, he shows sudden vulnerability. Their psychological bond is undeniable. Jody does not waver, delivering a hollow, absolute no. That is 5 years of trauma talking. She escaped the darkness for a reason, refusing to ever go back. Heals. I watched my father die for this. I am out, she whispers. You and I must see the real tragedy here. It is not just her past, but his present. Hector's eyes flicker with sorrow. Still, he asks, what if we guaranteed her safety? Jody shatters that fantasy. It is never about body to submit. It is the paranoia, the violence, the terror of burying someone you love. Hector bows his head. He understands and the tension breaks. Heals. Jody thinks he accepts her rejection, but Hector leans in, his gaze melting her walls. What if it is not about the syndicates, just about us? The ground shifts. Jody repeats the word, trembling. Hector offers a quiet smile. I feel something for you. This raw honesty from a ruthless man leaves her entirely breathless. Heals. Ever since you saved my life, so I want to see where this goes, he confesses. The emotional walls finally fracture. Jod admits the pull is undeniable, but her fear is equally deep. Hector's mask slips, a flash of genuine pain, showing as he asks if she fears him. Jod offers a devastating truth. She doesn't fear himself. She is terrified of the brutal underworld, he commands. She fears embracing this beautiful danger, only to wake up and realize she is morphed into the very monster she swore to outrun. Heals. Hector reaches across the table, taking her hand with a tenderness suited for a poet, not a ruthless crime boss. Then we take it slow, he promises. He vows not to drag her into his violent shadows, though he refuses to hide his desperate desire for her. Heals. Jod studies their intertwined hands, then meets his pleading gaze. Metaphorically, she is standing at the edge of a sheer drop. This romance will either resurrect her spirit or reduce her entire life to ashes. And the great tragic irony of it all, Heals. She is entirely ready to close her eyes and take the plunge. Heals. She breathes out a soft surrender. Okay, slow. A genuine, quiet smile graces Hector's features. He gently kisses her fingers, effectively sealing their unspoken pact, and for a fleeting moment, Heals. Jod actually believes they can survive this collision of worlds. A week drifts by after that turning point on the terrace. They fall into a bizarre, tranquil rhythm. Heals. Jod loses herself in literature while the Don silently orchestrates his criminal empire. Their evenings are spent unpacking each other's trauma, their emotional roots growing deeper by the day. Yet, Heals, even smothered in extreme luxury and suffocating security. Heals. Jod feels the psychological walls closing in. She craves the mundane noise of a normal life. Plus, her best friend Jamie has been texting constantly, petrified that Jod is dead in a ditch somewhere. By Thursday morning, Jod summons her nerve. Heals. She spots Hector in the kitchen, scowling darkly at his tablet. Before hesitation paralyzes her, she speaks, I need to go out today. She holds firm now. Heals. You and I both know the agonizing dread a crime lord feels the second his weakness. The woman he loves attempts to step outside his fortified iron gates. Heals. Hector slowly looks up. You can practically witness the silent war battling behind his eyes. His primal instinct demands he lock her in a gilded cage where nothing can harm her, yet he understands that true love cannot function as a prison. Heals. Forcing his tone to remain level, he asks where she is going. Jod pours her coffee, performing the illusion of a mundane morning. She has to see Jamie before her friend alerts the authorities. Heals. Stepping beyond his fortress walls is an incredibly dangerous gamble. The ruthless ghosts of the underworld are always hunting, waiting in the margins to tear their fragile peace to shreds. Heals. With security, Hector barks, is by no means a request. It is an absolute mandate. Jody nods, already bracing for the oppressive weight of his protection. Hector deploys Marcus, his apex enforcer. Heals. We are looking at a former military operative designed to walk through hellfire. Hector pins her with an intense stare, commanding her to stay within his line of sight every single second. Jody agrees. Heals. Forced to swallow the tragic irony of requiring a literal hitman simply to visit her old workplace. Shortly after, this absolute titan enters the kitchen. Marcus is a human weapon. Heals. His eyes automatically sweeping the space like a machine processing fatal threats. Heals. The drive to the local bar drowns in profound silence. Jody's Mafia father instilled one grim lesson in her mind. The dead calm before a storm is exactly when you should panic. Marcus drives with clinical perfection, heels, positioning the vehicle to monitor every escape route. As they exit, he shadows her like a coiled spring, primed to snap a neck instantly. Jody attempts to project an aura of normalcy, despite the human weapon hovering at her shoulder. Inside, heels. Jamie cleans glasses, bearing the identical haunted expression Jody wore during the recent sniper ambush. Spotting Jody, Jamie's facade completely shatters into shock, furious anger, and ultimately, a bone-deep relief. Heels. Jody, finally. I thought you'd. Jamie freezes the second Marcus looms in the doorway. Her widened eyes silently scream that they need a private conversation. Hey, Jamie, Jody says, heels, forcing her tone to remain perfectly level while her titan of a bodyguard stands like a granite monument. Sorry I vanished. Look, I can explain. But that sentence is left entirely unfinished, because in that microsecond, she registers the sound, feels, a suppressed pop echoing from the street. Jody's buried childhood conditioning instantly reignites. She knows the acoustic signature of a silencer. Her veins run ice cold. Marcus collapses before his fingers can even graze his weapon. Feels a dark pool of blood rapidly expanding across the pristine floor tiles. Feels. Jamie begins to scream, but to Jody, the noise feels miles away. Her singular focus narrows entirely onto the woman gliding through the entrance. The intruder moves with predatory grace. Dark hair slicked back, heels, possessing vacant eyes that view Jody as merely another bureaucratic casualty. This is an assassin hollowed out by her own body count. Jody Russo, Jane states. Her tone is chillingly detached. Feels. She sounds like she is discussing a mild weather forecast rather than orchestrating a murder. Lindsay sends his regards. Jane reaches for her holstered firearm, but Jody's kinetic response is already underway. Feels. Her father did not violently drill survival tactics into her psyche just so she would paralyze when death finally breached the door. Feels. Jody launches the nearest table directly at the threat. It earns her a microscopic flinch, which is all the time she needs to cross the room. She seizes Jane's wrist before the steel even clears the leather. The ensuing brawl is feral and vicious, feels, yet displays a striking lethal choreography. Two highly conditioned women exchanging devastating blows. Jody tastes copper as a stray elbow catches her lip, but she absorbs the kinetic shock, desperately wrestling the gun away. Feels. Jane is a terrifying combatant, far superior to any sparring partner Jody's father ever supplied. However, Jody survived her youth by absorbing hits from massive mobsters, mastering the dark science of leverage when brute strength proved useless. Heels. As Jane throws a reckless right hook, Jody ducks, traps the limb, and violently redirects the assassin's own lethal momentum against her. Heels. Let's pause to observe this critical shift. You and I are watching childhood trauma fully take the wheel. The sickening crack of bone shatters the sudden silence of the tavern. Jane releases a piercing shriek, heels, collapsing as her arm twists into a grotesque angle. Jody smoothly retrieves the fallen weapon, centering the barrel squarely on the assassin's skull. Her grip remains terrifyingly stable, despite the raw adrenaline flooding her system. Heels. Who sent you? Jody demands. She already possesses the intel, but securing a verbal confession is paramount. Lindsay. Jane chokes out a fractured, agonizing laugh. Starved of oxygen from the intense pain, the killer flashes a twisted, feels macabre amusement that renders her completely unhinged. Yeah, she wheezes, fiercely cradling her pulverized limb. Feels. He wants you dead for saving Hector. For dismantling his syndicate's agenda. Tell him he needs to try significantly harder, Jody replies. Her vocal tone is remarkably flat, entirely hollowed out by discipline. Feels. Her crime boss father would have beamed with pride. This is the exact emotional void he trained her to weaponize. Oh, he will, Jane whispers. A dark glimmer dances in the killer's eyes, perhaps genuine respect, Feels, or the grim recognition of a fellow survivor. And next time you won't be so lucky. I am always ready, Jody states. She drives the heavy steel grip directly into Jane's temple, Feels. It is a mathematically calculated strike designed to induce unconsciousness, not death. Jane arrived as an executioner, but Jody actively rejects the role of a murderer. It proves her father's ultimate thesis. Feels. Preserving life until the absolute final resort is the singular boundary keeping a professional from becoming a monster. Feels. Jane slumps to the floorboards, completely incapacitated. Jody slowly lowers the firearm, finally granting the adrenaline permission to shake her hands. She glances toward Jamie, who remains barricaded behind the counter. Feels. Eyes stretched wide with pure psychological terror. Suddenly, the violent shriek of braking tires tears through the street. Jody's posture goes rigid, heels, bracing for a second wave of cartel violence until her brain registers Hector's signature black SUV. The door violently swings open before the armor-plated car even halts. The Mafia Don emerges, heels, his meticulously crafted composure entirely shattered. His frantic gaze sweeps the blood-stained crime scene until it locks onto her. Witnessing Jody standing upright and fundamentally whole, the raw, heels, unfiltered relief cascading across his face causes her own heart to physically ache. Heels. Hector strides inside, his tactical mind processing the slaughter in a microsecond. Marcus eliminated at the entryway, the assassin crumpled and broken, and Jody, standing triumphant amid the wreckage, bleeding but reigning entirely supreme. Heels. You took her down? Hector asks. His baritone carries a profound awe, intricately laced with a dark territorial pride that causes Jody's cheeks to warm, despite the surrounding carnage. Yeah? She exhales, heels, finally permitting her heavy psychological armor to dissolve. Her protector has arrived. The war is temporarily paused. She was skilled, but I am better. My father taught me well. A deeply conflicted wave of pride washes over her, heels. She spent half a decade burying her patriarch's brutal syllabus. Yet tonight, that toxic inheritance is the sole reason she is breathing. The violent legacy can no longer be denied. Heels. Hector closes the agonizing distance, his gaze frantically sweeping her frame for concealed trauma. As his fingers delicately brush her jawline to examine her split lip, a profound, tragic warmth blooms in Jody's chest. You're bleeding, he murmurs. Heels. His voice is incredibly thick, bleeding far more vulnerability than a crime syndicate boss should ever broadcast. I am okay, Jody whispers, raising her palm to anchor his. Just a scratch. I have survived worse. Right on cue, heels. Logan enters with a phantom cleanup crew. Their silent, methodical erasure of the carnage highlights how disturbingly routine this violence truly is. So, what are you and I left to conclude, heels? Jody is finally internalizing the crushing reality that loving this man means permanently chaining herself to the shadows. Heels. Hector turned her around, hands heavy on her shoulders, gentle but absolute, a king asserting his rule. Lindsay won't stop, Jody warned, desperate to make him understand the stakes. He wants you buried, and now me too. Hector didn't flinch. Then I put him in the dirt, he replied, his voice a freezing current. Today. He looked at Logan, who was moving Marcus's body, his tone turning to steel. Find Lindsay now. Give me a location. Heels. Already tracking him, Logan muttered, orchestrating the hunt from his screen. Jody watched the cold machinery of the mob, a world she just fell back into. Hector pulled her fiercely against him, a heavy, desperate claim. Against his chest, heels, she felt his heart hammering, a jarring crack in his stone armor. You stay with me, he breathed into her hair, sending a jolt through her. Always. Until it ends. No arguing. Part of her knew she should resist, heels. To declare she didn't need a savior after pulling her own weight, heels. Yet deep down, she was tired of fighting the tide alone. Letting a man like Hector become her armor felt dangerously appealing. All right, Jody surrendered into his shirt. Instantly, the rigid tension drained from his frame. Jamie walked over, heels, eyes hollow from the bloodshed, looking at Jody with terror and tragic understanding. Just go, Jamie whispered. Stay safe. We talk when the dust settles. Hector kept an anchoring hand on Jody, guiding her away, heels. Safely inside the SUV heading to the estate, Jody collapsed against his shoulder, letting the raw shock finally pull her under. Heels. What do you and I make of this psychological web? Jody just fought an assassin and handed her fate to a crime lord. A fever dream, but her bruised ribs proved otherwise. You did incredible, Hector whispered, kissing her head. Heels. Strange tenderness from a man built for violence. Riding through the night, knowing Hector planned to wipe Lindsay off the map, Jody dared to hope. But cold dread lingered. Does this cycle ever end well, or is this just the eye of the storm? Heels. Chapter 5. Confronting Lindsay in dark possession. Heels. Step back into the shadows with me. I am not leaving, Hector whispered, slipping out before dawn. Jody woke to the door clicking shut, his boots fading away. Fear gripped her. Today, the hunt for Lindsay Morone began. She ran to the window, heels, watching 4 armored SUVs roll through the gates. The brutal syndicate life she tried to outrun was staring right back. The morning felt like lead. She paced, terrified of picturing him dead on the pavement. Then Logan called with 3 freezing words. Heels. We found him. Heels. That message crushed Jody's chest. Thinking about losing him tore her apart. In 1 week, this mob boss had planted roots deep in her soul. At a rotting port warehouse, hell broke loose. Hector arrived with 10 enforcers, catching Lindsay's crew completely blind. Gunfire cracked like thunder in an empty tomb. 10 brutal minutes later, the violence peaked. 4 of Lindsay's men dead, 3 bleeding, 1 fleeing. The old boss was cornered. Heels. Lindsay Marone was an old mobster who thought he held the cards, but Hector approached, weapon in hand. They shoved Lindsay to the gritty floor. Hector stood over him, eyes dead. "Why did you try to clip me?" he asked. That quiet whisper carried more horror than any scream. Lindsay spat blood, looking up like he still wore a crown. Heels. Lindsay rasped that Hector simply held too much power. He wanted the boss dead, pure, cold business. Hector nodded slowly, expecting that logic. Then he asked the only thing that mattered. "Why target Jody?" The bleeding man laughed, coughing up red. "Because she saved your life," he sneered. "I saw the footage. She is your only weakness. Killing her would break you." The raw, bone-chilling rage that warped Hector's face made even his loyal right-hand man step back. Heels. When Hector spoke, his voice froze the room. "You were wrong," he murmured, aiming low. A shot cracked. Lindsay screamed as lead ripped through his thigh, spilling dark blood. Hector lowered the gun in absolute glacier. "You never touch what is mine. Understood?" Pale as a ghost, Lindsay nodded frantically. "Understood," he choked out. Hector smirked, signaling his men back. "Leave my city forever, because the next round," Heels, "goes right through your skull." He pressed the steel between Lindsay's eyes, then pulled back. The broken mobster dragged himself away, leaving a red trail. Hector watched him go, a stone mask. By sunset, his SUV reached the estate. Inside, Jody paced, drowning in panic. The sound of tires brought a crushing wave of relief. She bolted to the foyer as he walked in. Their eyes met. He was safe. That blood belonged to someone else. Heels. The weight finally lifted off her. "Is the war over?" she whispered. Hector locked the door and was gone. Those words carried the heavy burden of his empire. Then she nervously blurted, "So can I go back to my normal life now?" The moment she said it, the idea tasted like ash. Leaving him suddenly felt wrong. Hector froze. "You really want to leave?" he asked. The terrifying predator suddenly looked heartbreakingly human, leaving Jody completely speechless. Heels. Let's break this moment down. Truth is, Jody dreaded going back to her empty apartment. "No," she admitted, voice shaking, "but I thought you kept me here for protection." Hector closed the distance, making her pulse spike. Heels. He locked her in that consuming stare. "I want you here because I want you," he stated. "Not for safety, just you." The ruthless crime boss reached out, touching her cheek with impossible care. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice wrapping around her. Heels. "Not as a guest, as mine. A claim and a vow." Heels. Logic said run, but her heart gave in. "I'll stay," she breathed. "But no cartel business, I'm only here for you." "That's all I need," Hector murmured, pulling her close. This kiss wasn't a distraction. It was raw, desperate fire. A crash of pure obsession. As their moes met, Jody's fear melted away. He gripped her waist, anchoring her as passion swallowed them whole. Heels. She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding tight to a dangerous man, a strange dance of fear and total devotion. Breaking apart for air, Hector rested against her lips. "Mine," he rasped, pulling her into a slower, deeper kiss. Pausing again, he rested his forehead against hers in the shadows. "Mine," Jody whispered back, surrendering to the beautiful tragedy. That rare, genuine smile on his face was enough to shatter her completely. Heels. In that foyer, Jody accepted that loving a monster was worth the risk. 3 quiet months pass. We find Jody waking on a warm May morning, tangled in sheets. Beside her, Hector slept deeply, stripped of the heavy paranoia haunting a mob boss. She lingered in the dawn, studying his face before slipping out of bed, leaving the Dark King to his peace. Heels. Their lives settled into a strange rhythm, totally unlike the violence that forged them. "So, what do you and I make of this ending?" She lived with the Don, but guarded her independence. He kept his bloody business far from home. A fragile glass house, but it worked. Jody even went back to pouring drinks at her bar. Naturally, Hector blanketed the place with hidden protection. She simply played along, never mentioning the lethal, quiet men nursing drinks in the corner. Heels. Jamie rolled her eyes at the bodyguards, the heavy tax for loving an underworld king. Soon, they simply ignored the enforcers at the door. That morning, Jody wandered into the kitchen to find Hector already awake. Heels. Seeing a ruthless crime boss in sweatpants pouring coffee created a quiet dissonance. The vulnerability of a violent man acting so normal made her chest ache. Hearing her, he offered that private, fractured smile. "Good morning, Eels." His deep voice rumbled, dismantling her defenses. He pulled her close, smelling of soap and the faint echo of violence. "Eels, we know peace in this world is painfully fragile." She whispered into his chest, stealing a quiet second before reality intruded. He handed her coffee, a simple act of devotion. Later, Jody returned to the estate. She had slowly thawed those cold halls, adding photos and books. Tonight, Jamie was visiting, desperate to see how her friend was surviving inside this beautiful gilded cage. Eels. Shadows gathered. Hector had agreed to the visit, his dry humor proving his iron walls were finally crumbling. At dusk, Jamie's rusted car arrived, a stark contrast to Hector's fleet of supercars. Jody guided her through the mansion. Eels. Her friend was unraveling, caught between awe and terror of the syndicate wealth surrounding them. Settling on the porch with wine, Jamie paused, fixing Jody with a heavy stare. "You are glowing," she whispered. Her voice held joy. Eels. Masking deep fear for her friend's soul. Jody sipped her wine, hiding a smile. The terrifying truth was she had never felt more alive. Eels. She was happier now than in years. "I am happy," she admitted, the words slipping out because they were true. She told Jamie Hector was different. This ruthless underworld boss would shed his armor behind closed doors, offering quiet, steady warmth. Eels. Jamie stared, floored, before dropping a heavy reality check. Even though he is a literal mafia boss, no judgment, just disbelief that Jody was embracing the danger she fled 5 years ago. "He keeps me out of the dark," Jody replied. Eels, her raw gratitude obvious. It was the truth. The man who ruled the streets finally let her breathe. Eels. She still worked bar shifts, keeping her independence far from his cartel wars. He loved her without the poison of control. Then Jamie asked the fatal question. "So, you love him?" It caught Jody off guard, stealing her breath. She froze. Saying it out loud dragged this dream into harsh reality. "So much," she whispered, barely a sound, yet it carried a crushing weight. "Wase." It was the truth. Eels. She was entirely lost to Hector Ricci. She fell for how this kingpin looked at her like the only soul in a ruined world. She fell for the quiet protector beneath his lethal armor, a man who respected her boundaries. Eels. Jamie offered a soft smile and took her hand, an unspoken anchor only a true friend provides. They sat in comfortable silence, the night fading into easy laughter. As Jamie left, she hugged Jody tightly, whispering, "Be happy, you deserve it." Eels. The weight of those words struck deep, bringing a sudden shine of tears to her eyes. Eels. Let's look closely, because the narrative shifts right here. The next day, Jody poured drinks, totally unaware of the heavy conversation across town. Inside his quiet office, Hector waited until he was alone with his brother Logan. Eels. Logan was skimming syndicate reports when Hector spoke, his voice dangerously calm. "I am going to ask her to marry me." Logan dropped his papers, completely floored. He knew the affection ran deep, but marriage? Seriously. Logan managed to ask. Eels, shock heavy in his throat. "Boss, this is massive." Eels. A quiet pride settled in Logan's eyes. It was like watching a violent man realize a world existed beyond blood and concrete. "I know," Hector replied, leaning back with his cold, empire-building focus. "But she is everything. I am making it permanent." He spoke without a single doubt. Logan sat in silence before asking the only question that mattered. Is she actually going to say yes? The air grew thick. They knew she spent 5 years fleeing the exact underworld Hector ruled. Eels. "I hope so," Hector murmured. For once, this untouchable boss sounded painfully human. Then dark resolve returned. "If not, I will ask her every single day until she stays." Logan let out a sudden laugh, a rare, Eels, unguarded moment that stripped away the violence. "You are completely ruined over this girl," Logan stated. "Absolutely," Hector admitted, offering no defense. The Underground King looked at peace, Eels, as if surrendering his heart was the only victory that mattered. They sat quietly, letting the weight of this choice settle. Eels. Logan rested a hand on his brother's shoulder. "She will say yes," he said softly. "You earned this." Later, Jody walked in to find Hector pacing like a caged storm without speaking. He pulled her into a silent, desperate embrace. In that quiet room, profound gratitude washed over her. She was thankful she had stopped running, finally finding shelter with the city's most dangerous man. Eels. She had no idea her world was about to shift. Held against his chest, she felt a heavy peace. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. Her breath caught. The gravity of his voice still stopped her heart. "I love you too," she whispered, sinking into his absolute safety. Looking into an unwritten future, she finally let herself believe it. The running was over. She was home. Feels. 6 months slipped by like water. Since that first kiss, they found a rhythm that just worked. She woke beside the crime boss, worked the bar to maintain her independence, and returned to the estate they shared. But on a quiet Friday, the door opened, Feels, and Hector stepped into her bar. He never did this. Wearing a dark suit, his expression was unreadable, carrying the chill of the streets. Seeing him made her chest tighten. You and I both know that feeling. When the air changes, Feels, and you realize something massive is about to happen, Feels. Jamie shot her a knowing look as he approached. Jody rolled her eyes, offering Hector a soft smile. Hey, did not expect you here. Are we good? Faint panic edged her voice. A daytime visit from a king usually meant perfect. Hector replied steadily, flashing a cryptic smile. But I need you to leave early. I have a place to show you. It wasn't an order or a request. It was just the quiet gravity of a man offering his hand. Feels. What kind of place? She asked, untying her apron. Jamie waved her away with a knowing smile. Grabbing her bags, Hector said. He offered his hand with that deadly old-world elegance. She took it, stepping outside. On the street, his car sat alone. No driver, no armed security. For a crime boss with countless enemies, shedding his armor like this meant he was laying absolutely everything on the line. Feels. They drove for an hour, leaving the city lights behind for the coast. Hector gripped the wheel in silence. Jody watched the shadows, trying to read his mind. The road ended at a jagged cliffside overlooking the black ocean. Feels. The water stretched into eternity, meeting a bruised purple and orange sky. Why are we out here? She whispered as the door shut. The massive cliff demanded reverence. The cold wind hit them, tasting of salt, Feels, as waves shattered against the rocks below like a heavy heartbeat. The stage was finally set for a question that would echo forever. Feels. Picture this with me. Hector, a man shaped by underworld violence, takes Jody by the hands. His dark eyes lock onto hers, making the rest of the world vanish. He softly revealed he brought her to this exact cliff because she once mentioned dreaming of ocean waves and absolute peace. Jody just stands there, stunned. She barely remembers saying it. Her mind scrambles, trying to pinpoint when she let that slip. Hector watches her with quiet, burning devotion, noting it was 3 months ago. Feels. He held on to a passing dinner remark about marrying by the sea. He tells her he keeps every quiet wish she makes. Jody's pulse hammers as the reality sets in. This crime boss looks at her like she is sheer salvation. Taking a slow breath, his voice rough like crushed glass, he confesses she saved him. She kept him breathing that chaotic day at the restaurant, kissing him just to distract a gunman. Gripping her hands, he admits she made him crave a real life beyond his cold empire. Feels. He wants a family. A quiet existence that a man bred for violence usually never dares to imagine. Tears blur Jody's eyes as the weight of it hits her, stealing her breath. Then, the man who owes to absolutely no one slowly drops to one knee on that windswept dirt. Set against the blood-red sunset, Jody feels her heart stop. She gasps his name, covering her mouth as the tears break free. Hector smiles tenderly, pulling a velvet box from his coat, revealing a flawless diamond. Feels. The heavy diamond seems to hold the sunset itself. Hector meets her gaze, asking her to marry him. His rough voice carries a fragile vulnerability he hides from his criminal empire. He wants to marry her right now, just the two of them. Jody trembles, choking out a whisper through her tears. Did he actually remember? 6 months of chaos washes away. The hardened mob boss swears he remembered every syllable, his voice breaking as he begs her to share his life and let him worship her. Feels. He wants them to rule together. Jody screams her answer, so loud it must carry over the water. Yes, she pulls her dangerous lover up, crashing into his arms. The crime boss actually laughs, holding her tight and spinning her under the open sky. His steady hands shake as he slides the ring onto her finger. He pulls her in for a breathless kiss, anchoring their fractured souls. Pulling back, they smile like normal people. Jody's cheeks ache from the pure, wild joy of it all. Feels. Let's look at this together, because the reality is brilliant. Jody wipes her eyes, her mind catching up to his words. Marrying right this second? Hector nods calmly, pointing behind her. She was so blinded by him, she missed an older man standing nearby, right next to Hector's lethal enforcer, Logan. Incredibly, the hitman is actually smiling. Hector softly explains he brought an efficient, and Logan is standing in as their witness. Feels. Hector offers to wait, to throw a massive underworld wedding if she wants, but Jody instantly refuses. She shouts her denial so fast that both men grin. She wants it now, leaving the dark Mafia traditions far behind them. She just wants the crashing waves, the man she loves, and a loyal friend. Hector's face lights up with raw, unprotected joy, transforming the ruthless criminal into a reborn man. He promises to do it now, lacing his fingers through hers. Heels. The older man steps up, while Logan pulls out his phone to record it. Jody stares at Hector against the fiery sky, realizing every ounce of pain and violence they survived led to this quiet peace. This is their turning point. Jump forward 30 minutes, and they stand on the edge of the world. It feels like a fragile dream. Hector holds her tight, his grip fierce and deeply possessive, as if the underworld shadows themselves might try to drag her away. Feels. The tired efficient actually wipes a tear away, while Logan films with a warmth you wouldn't expect from a killer. Then, gravel crunches, breaking the silence. Jody turns, totally confused by the interruption. Her heart skips when her best friend, Jamie, leaps us out of a beaten-down car, looking completely stunned. Jody looks back at Hector. The feared crime boss just gives a soft shrug. He carefully moved every piece on the board, just to hand her this perfect night. Feels. Hector asks if she honestly thought he would let her do this without her best friend. That quiet thoughtfulness makes Jody break down again. Jamie sprints across the dirt, pulling Jody into a desperate hug. They hold on to each other, heels, laughing and crying in the sea breeze. Jamie says this beautiful, chaotic mess is exactly how Jody was meant to marry, and she's right. No massive cathedral could ever match this wild devotion. The efficient clears his throat, heels. Jamie and Logan take their spots, while Hector and Jody face the waves to start their new life. Heels. The sky burns with violent color above them. The efficient talks about loyalty, but Jody barely hears it. She is anchored to Hector's dark, steady eyes. Then, it's time for their vows. Hector squeezes her hand. His deep voice cuts the wind, full of absolute truth. He tells the small crowd she saved him with a sudden kiss. Jamie and Logan trade shocked looks, finally realizing the dangerous spark that started this whole romance. Heels. You and I know this is where a story turns into legend. He recalls the day a stranger risked everything to shield him. Now he vows to protect her from the underworld, even knowing she's strong enough to stand alone. He promises to weather every storm together. The ruthless boss actually pauses, fighting the emotion in his chest. In a low murmur, he calls her his equal. She isn't property. She's a queen who chooses him, and he promises to spend forever earning that grace. Heels. Jody didn't fight her tears. Taking a shaky breath, she found her voice. You gave me a new life, she whispered, just surviving. You showed up. You proved I could have a partnership where I didn't lose myself. No darkness, just love. Jamie muffled a sob behind them. Hearing her friend gave Jody that final push of courage. I promise to love every version of you, she said. The gentle man and the dangerous one. The kind heart and the ruthless boss. Feels. Picture this with me. I promise to challenge you and support you always. To make you happy because you brought me joy I never knew existed. Always. The efficient smiled, his words carrying over the wind. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Feels. You may kiss the bride. Hector didn't waste a second. He pulled Jody flush against him, kissing her with an intensity that buckled her knees. The world melted away. Just them. That kiss. This dangerous man was finally her husband, legally and entirely. Feels. They kissed until the sun hit the water, soaking the beach in liquid gold. Pulling back, they laughed through their tears. Jamie and Logan cheered while the efficient beamed. Hector leaned in, resting his forehead, Feels against hers. They stayed like that for a long minute, just breathing the same air, letting the reality anchor them. They did it. They were married. My wife, he whispered, tasting the word in the dark. Feels. The smile breaking across his hardened face was so bright, it made her chest ache. My husband knew. I got his words perfectly right. Jamie tackled them then, pulling them into a massive hug. Logan even got dragged in. Heels. Stood on the sand, no mafia shadows, no danger, just people clinging to each other, celebrating a peace that felt impossibly rare. Heels. Jump forward 2 weeks. She stood under the hot Greek sun on a private island Hector rented. It was so flawless it felt like a dream. Turquoise water, blinding white sand, and a quiet village belonging entirely to them. Heels. The only others were staff who dropped off food and vanished like ghosts. They spent their days walking the island, swimming, and completely losing themselves in each other, just existing, totally off the map. No underworld burdens, no cartel shadows. Feels. nothing to tear them down. On their 10th night, she stood alone by the water, watching the sunset bleed across the fading sky. Heels. Her toes dug into the warm sand, the breeze lifting her dress. Hector stepped from the shadows, wrapping his arms securely around her. He pulled her flush against his chest, resting his chin on her shoulder. "This is perfect," she breathed. Heels. For the first time, she felt entirely safe. "Thank you for giving me what I needed before I knew it." "You deserve the world," he whispered, pressing a soft kiss to her neck. They stood wrapped in that quiet comfort. Then he spoke again. Heels. The sudden gravity in his voice yanked her right back down to earth. Heels. "Let's look at this scene together, shall we? Notice how the air shifts." "I have a question for you," Hector murmured, carrying a weight that signaled something profound. She turned, pressing her palms against his chest, feeling his heart thud. Steady, Heels. Fierce. He looked down with a raw vulnerability that entirely dismantled her defenses. When he spoke, he stepped softly through the dark. "Do you want children someday?" This question hung over the water, loaded with divergent paths. Heels. Her chest tightened. It was a monumental permanent shift. Yet her answer surfaced instinctively, no hesitation required. Heels. "Yes," Jody answered instantly. We visually see the relief wash through his exhausted eyes. "I want them with you." She paused, throwing the question back. "And you?" "Very much," he replied, leaving no room for shadows in his certainty. Yet structurally, Heels, he places no burden on her. "Only when you are ready." This is classic Hector, a man born in the cycle of violence, constantly handing her the power. He gives her the choice, even as his soul aches for it. Heels. Looking at the man who loved her broken pieces without demanding repairs, Jody felt a fierce surge of courage. It pushed her to confess her long-held truth. Heels. "What if I told you I'm ready?" she asked. His dark eyes stretched wide. Not this exact second, but soon. The smile that suddenly shattered his mobster exterior was blinding. It visually stripped away his years of toxic masculinity. Heels, exposing sheer vulnerability. He pulled her into a kiss that tasted like a vow, carving out a brand new narrative. "Then we start trying," he murmured. "Whenever you want." "Soon," she repeated, a warm nod of anticipation twisting in her chest. Heels. "I cannot wait," Hector whispered. He kissed her again as the cinematic sun drowned in the ocean, flaring brightly before the midnight hours took control. Heels. Standing on that empty beach against the dark water, she finally believed it. They had secured something impossibly rare, something worth guarding against the syndicate. 1 year later, the script flips. Heels. 12 months since Hector changed her universe at that very cliff edge, they were driving right back for their anniversary. But now her pulse raced for a distinct reason. Hector sat behind the wheel, wearing a smug smirk. Heels. Convinced he was orchestrating the ultimate surprise. Naturally, Jody knew their destination. When they parked at the familiar cliff, the sheer poetry of the location hit her deep. They walked out to the exact dirt of their vows. Heels. Hector wrapped her in a massive hug, a quiet shelter built from surviving side by side. Heels. 1 whole year, she murmured against his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat. "Honestly, it feels like you proposed yesterday." "Best year of my life," Hector replied, kissing the crown of her head. They stood in the heavy quiet. Then he pulled back. Heels. A familiar spark igniting in his dark eyes. "And this next year, it is going to be even better." "Oh yeah? Why is that?" she teased. She already knew, having carried a beautiful secret for a week. Hector traced her cheek, his rough Heels' violent hand so incredibly gentle it stole her breath. Heels. His voice held a fragile hope he typically hid from the underworld. "Because maybe we start our family." He searched her face for validation. "You said you were ready." Her heart took off. Tears burned her eyes as the awaited second arrived. Heels. She grabbed his scarred hand, pressing it flat against her stomach. It was physically flat, but metaphorically holding their ultimate redemption. "Hector," she whispered, "what if I told you we already started?" He stopped breathing. Heels. Turned entirely to stone. As reality crashed into his brain, we see the exact heartbeat the connection landed. "What?" he breathed. A shaky, broken sound. Heels. "You and I have to look closely at this exact frame." He stood completely stripped of his armor, starving for it to be true. "I am pregnant," she cried, tears tracking down. 8 weeks. I needed to tell you here, right where it all started." Heels. She gripped his hand against her skin, where our real life began. Hector let out an agonizing sound, half laugh, half sob. The emotional walls of La Cosa Nostra just shattered. Tears pooled in the ruthless man's eyes, washing down his cheeks. Heels. The look he gave her was painfully pure. "Really?" His deep voice choked out. Heels. We are going to be parents, she nodded, laughing through her tears. Yes, you are going to be a dad. That was the psychological breaking point. Every last thread of control he maintained just snapped. The dangerous, heels, untouchable man dropped straight to his knees in the cold dirt. His scarred hands literally trembled as he held her waist with a holy reverence. Hi, little one, Hector whispered, his heavy voice thick with emotion. I am your dad, Heels, and I already love you. He pressed a soft kiss to her dress. Looking up, his eyes shone with overwhelming salvation. Thank you for saving me, he confessed. Heels. Jody sank right into the dirt beside him, uncaring of the mess, pulling him into a desperate grounding embrace. She buried her face in his shoulder, Heels, silently thanking him for finally seeing her, for loving her bruised soul and building a life she never thought possible. His answer was a quiet, unbreakable promise. They simply sat in the dust, two battered characters holding on to each other, Heels, letting tears fall as the sun burned the sky into something beautiful. Pulling apart, they laughed through the wreckage of their past. It is that blinding, agonizing joy felt only when the dark finally breaks. Heels. Hector brushes the tears from her cheeks, then his own, before asking the monumental question, a boy or a girl? Jody rests her hand over his. It is early, she whispers, but she feels it in her bones, a girl. Hector's smile displays pure, unguarded pride. Heels. He declares this kid will be a fierce little warrior, mirroring her mother. Pulling back, Jody murmurs the child will definitely inherit his brutal stubbornness. Hector lets out a real, heavy laugh. He pulls her close, guiding her to the cliff edge, Heels, their feet dangling over the dark, crashing ocean below. Heels. Sitting shoulder to shoulder, they remain anchored to each other. Hector's hand drifts back to her stomach, physically holding his future. They breathe in that heavy silence as the sun bleeds into the horizon. Jody looks at him, Heels, needing verbal confirmation. Is he truly happy? Hector does not hesitate. He looks at this woman and states she handed him a second life, the only kind of love that actually matters. He brushes her stomach softly. The bloodline continues, Heels, but in total peace. How could he not be terrified and completely overjoyed? Jody rests against him, whispering she finally feels the exact same way. Heels. She confesses the hollow ache in her chest has finally vanished. Since her father died, she had not known what a real home felt like. Yet Hector provided that impossible, reckless kind of love, a family she never saw coming. Heels. They sit wrapped in that truth as daylight fades into a bruised purple, the first stars bleeding through the dark. Slowly, Hector leans down toward her stomach. His voice drops into a raw whisper. Heels. He tells the unborn child about the legend of their mother, how she saved a dead man walking, giving him the singular reason to keep living. Heels. Hector presses a quiet kiss against her dress, making a blood vow to shield this child from the shadows of his Mafia past. Jody chokes in a sob, whispering he will be a wonderful father. He simply pulls her closer. So, what do you and I take away from this ending? Up on that exact cliff where their chaotic story began, Jody finally understands she survived the dark. That desperate kiss in a dive bar pulled them both from the wreckage, forging an unbreakable bloodline. Heels. Every wound was a price willingly paid just to share the shadows with him. Let's unpack the phantoms lingering in this narrative. Notice how the cliffside frames three pivotal moments: the proposal, the wedding, the child. Heels. It transforms into their sacred ground. Consider how Hector memorized a fleeting daydream Jody mentioned months prior about an oceanfront ceremony. This hardened crime boss treated her every syllable like gospel. And the wedding itself? Heels. It took place a mere 30 minutes after her acceptance, a breathless, frantic sprint toward eternity. Keep the timeline in mind, too. Anthony Russo passed away when Jody was 23. Heels. She dragged that heavy sorrow around for 5 full years before this love story even sparked. Heels. 5 long years pouring drinks, masking her trauma in plain sight until Hector entirely rewrote her world. And think about Jane Volkoff. Knocked out in that tavern, she simply faded into the background, erased from the board completely. Heels. Then we have Marcus, the sole character to actually meet his end in this grim chapter. Lindsay barely escaped with a broken leg, showing us that even a monster retains a fraction of mercy. Heels. Jamie shouldered the massive burden of Jody's history right from the start, and Logan? He almost wrecked his car when the truth of Jody's bloodline finally hit him. Honestly, the best reaction in the whole webtoon. Heels. Craving another deep dive into a tragic Mafia romance? Click the next video and linger in the shadows with me.